Good morning on this fine Sunday morning, and I dedicate today's class. You know, a lot of times before I give the class, I like to share and be. I love that I could share Torah with my friends over here, and that's that. That's a beautiful bracha, and I like to be open with my dear friends that give me the opportunity to share Torah. A lot of times before I give the class, I'm like not ready for various reasons. There's always more information. There's always being sort of emotionally prepared. There's stuff, and sometimes I just push the start button. Just start learning, start teaching Torah, and let Hashem do the rest. So, on that note, as we always try to make sure we have blessing in the Torah learning that we do, I give some tzedakah over here. I encourage you to do the same. There we go. And was noch, as we say by us in shul. I'm going to raise this a little bit. Let me see if this works. Yeah, I think this is better. A little upper, higher level over here. I think this is better. Hope the phone doesn't fall down. Yeah, okay. And I think we're good. And let's make a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyah bidvaro. So many of you heard I dedicate this class in memory and in the honor of the soul of my mother-in-law, Sarah Razel Bas Arya Leib Bas Keza, who passed away yesterday. I'm not going to give a class or share about my mother-in-law much today because it's for me personally, it's a little bit too raw, too painful. But I do plan to give her the proper honor, and perhaps in the next class or maybe sometime during this week, I will share more about my brother-in-law. My wife and I and my family had the incredible zchut, the incredible merit in many ways, including that she lived with us for many years, and as a result, there's a lot that can be shared and learned and be inspired by this very special individual. But I'm just not ready to do that yet, especially since the funeral didn't even take place yet. So not the appropriate time in my both mentally, emotionally, and there's usually we don't discuss much of that before the funeral. So, but nevertheless, we dedicate the honor or the merit of this class towards my mother-in-law's, or for my mother-in-law's, in honor and memory of my mother-in-law's neshama, soul. So I want to, the topic or the question we asked is it a crime to be a billionaire? Now, the reason for what triggered sort of the thought of that topic related to the parsha that we just read, where in the beginning of the parsha B'chukotai, we read, as I will share the words because it's blessings from Hashem, I will share those words and of blessings that God promises us. So I will share that. And the title of the class came because it was a bit of an uproar. One of the politicians last week said that to be a billionaire, you can't get there. I mean, I'm sort of paraphrasing. You can't get to be a billionaire without committing either crimes or at least injustices. And basically saying that this continues this anti-wealth, or as someone mentioned, the millionaires making fun of the billionaires. So I guess it's okay to make millions in ways that many of the critics of billionaires are discussing. But once you make billionaire, you're a billionaire, all of a sudden you've crossed the line and you invite criticism and tearing down by some. So this is not an extensive class on that discussion. But I will mention maybe one or two thoughts, but primarily as the focus over here is Torah and the class. I mean, there's no question, I'll just say very quickly, very briefly, there's no question that Torah recognizes and allows people and blesses people to be wealthy. And there's no number of when, okay, you've reached a certain cap of wealth, and at that point you have to give everything away. That's a personal choice. It's a personal choice. It's definitely not a reason for either confiscation or embarrassment or so on. Are there people who earn their money in an unjust way? Of course. You don't have to be a billionaire for that. You don't even have to be a millionaire for that. You could be someone ordinary. Money and earning money is a strong taiva, is a strong urge for people, and some people are often tested by that. And you could be a poor person, as we'll hear in a moment, the story I'm about to share, which triggered this topic, where you could be someone who is a pauper and you could be dishonest in how you earn your living, and you could be a billionaire and be kind and just and generous in how you treat your workers and how you treat your fellow human being and how you treat those who are even the janitors in your company. You treat them like mentioned. There are plenty of stories about that. So it's not how much you earn. So to categorize a general group of high successful people who have been blessed by Hashem, by God, to have good wisdom, good mazel, good ethics, or good work ethics, good drive, whatever it might be, to say as a general statement that smacks of deep jealousy, and that's dangerous in my opinion. Every individual has to be judged individually, whether they are an upstanding, righteous, honest person, and so on. And that's the general statement. You're welcome to ask questions, and perhaps I will address if I see some comments over here. But it's such a bad midah, we say in Yiddish or in Hebrew. It's such a bad characteristic to begrudge, not to allow somebody to have the blessing that was sent their way. It's just a bad. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avot, Hakina v'atayva v'akavod motziin et ha'adam min ha'olam. Jealousy and lust and the search of honor withdraw a person from this world, meaning they just become non-content with their own life, that they can't live life normally. Don't look at what someone else has in their pot. It's just, we're not raised that way. It's not a Torah value. It's just not a Torah value. Torah emphasizes charity, but Torah doesn't talk. And there are times when the community could put on a tax when there's a special need and so on. But even that was limited. It had guidelines and so on. But the idea of making targeting and making fun of a person who God has blessed. In fact, the Talmud says, Rebbe Mechabed Ashirim, that Rebbe, one of the greatest sages of the Talmud, would give great honor to the wealthy, not because he needed anything from the wealthy, because he himself was personally wealthy. In fact, the Talmud attests about him that he never had any sort of material pleasure just for the sake of pleasure. But he honor the wealthy because he said, if God entrusts them with those kind of funds and they use it wisely and they use it righteously and so on, I will respect them. It's just I don't know. From a Torah value perspective, you should be happy for somebody else. What you have is what you're meant to have. That's what you're meant to have. God will bless you. You work hard. You make a keli. You make a vehicle for the blessing that is due yours. Nobody is taking away what's due to come your way. Nobody. Hashem determines what you are meant to have. So be happy for somebody else. This whole approach from a sort of Torah, fine human character, I don't get it. I mean, I get it, but it's disgusting in simple terms. Okay. Having said that, I want to relate that to the parsha that we're talking about right now. Okay. Im bechukotai telechu. If you go in my statutes, says the Torah, says God in this week's parsha, ves mitzvosai tishmoru, and you will guard my mitzvahs, my commandments, vasitem osam, and you will fulfill those mitzvahs. Meaning, basically, you keep the Torah, you study the Torah, you work hard with Torah, you fulfill my mitzvahs, you guard my mitzvahs, you go beyond the letter of the law, etc., etc. Incidentally, the Or HaChaim, the famous Or HaChaim, has 48 insights in this first verse of the parsha that we just read, the Torah portion we read yesterday. The Torah continues, V'nasati gishmeichem be'itom. I will go ahead and I will give you your rain in its time. Yesterday I heard a vort, in Yiddish we say a vort, a little anecdote from, I don't remember from who, I think from the Rebbe Melech of Lizhensk. Somebody, as I was walking, stopped me and shared this with me yesterday in the synagogue, so I don't remember exactly who it's from, but just a nice little little anecdote, or not an anecdote, or a little insight, a little sort of vignette of wisdom that on this word, V'nasati gishmeichem be'itam, I will give you your rain. It just should have said Nasati Geshem, I'll give rain. Rain is a source of blessing. What does it mean, your rain? So essentially, your rain means that which is due to you. On Rosh Hashanah, God already assigns to us what we're supposed to get for the year. But sometimes there's blockages. And we have to remove the blockages, so actually throughout the year we get that blessing that was set aside for us. And that's what the Torah is alluding to when he says, V'nasati gishmeichem, I will give you your rain, your personal blessing that has already been allotted to you. And your personal blessing, whether it should come your way, has nothing to do with what someone else has. What's yours is yours. You just have to you have to be meritorious, and you have to do what it takes to make sure that your blessing actually reaches you in a down-to-earth, revealed, effective way, and so on. Okay, but nosnar it's yavula, and the land will give forth its produce, and the trees of the field will give forth its fruit. The Torah continues then and says how there will be such great abundance. And the Torah uses a term here, V'achaltem lachmachem lo soiva, and you will eat your bread so that you are satiated. Now this seems to be extra. If there's so much abundance, why does the Torah have to tell us that you will eat your bread in great abundance? And then the Torah, just to finish the verse, says, V'yashaftem lovetach ba'artzachem, you will rest with much security and much sort of certainty in your land. You will not have to fear from your enemies, over your enemies. Now, I just want to focus in here for a moment. I mean, this verse, there's so much that we could talk about, especially now with all that's going on with our enemies trying to destroy us in the Holy Land, and all the negative and anti-Semitic news and angles that are out there. Many of them are based on sort of blatant lies, to the extent that even many of our fellow supporters, be it both Jews and Gentiles, are sometimes turn to me and they say, is this true? Is that true? And many times it's nicht gesteugen and nicht geflogen, as we say in Yiddish. It has absolutely zero basis. So today you got to really verify what you're reading and so on. But the Torah tells us this is absolute truth. You will rest securely. You will dwell securely in your land. Now, I want to focus for a moment. V'achaltem lachmechem lasoiva. You will eat your bread to satiety, to your fill, to your full calmness and satisfaction. So I want to just mention over here a couple of the commentaries, but then we will elaborate, and I will share a Chassidic story. Okay? So when it talks about over here, v'achaltem lachmechem lasoiva, you will eat your bread to fill you in a good way. So here's a couple of commentaries. There's a collection in this Chumash, which is all Hebrew, but there's a nice collection over here. And he says, what does this mean? What does this mean, this blessing that you will eat your bread to make you full? Says the Klei Yakar that it means that you will eat until you're full, or until you're satiated, but he says it doesn't mean you're actually full, because it's not healthy, he says, to eat to your fill. He will eat just till. Over here means, there's an expression in the Talmud, it says ad v'lo yad b'chol. When we say until, it could mean until, but not exactly up to that point, just before that point. You know, on the lighter side, there's a bit of a coarse type of joke about today. You have people that even in observing sometimes the Shabbat or the holidays, and you have people who get a little bit carried away with their food and stuffing themselves. And the story is told about this fellow who was sitting by the Shabbat table, and he loved food, and his appearance showed that he loved food, and he was sort of complaining to his friend that his stomach is so filled, and his friend says to him, I'll try to say this in a more refined way. He says, why don't you stick your finger in and, lighten the load a little bit? And he responds, he says in Yiddish, he says, if I have space to put in my finger to release a little bit of the pressure, I'll stick in another chicken polka, another chicken thigh. That's how he was so carried away with his food. But that's sort of on the lighter side. But on the more serious side, there are various perushim, explanations of what does this mean. So, for example, he says, the Rasak says that it doesn't mean you'll fill yourself in a way that is unhealthy. The Talmud says, there's a statement in the Talmud that says a person should eat a third, drink a third, and leave 1/3 empty. So there is a health and an advice even from the Talmud that a person should not overeat. So therefore, the Rasag, the Reb Sadia Goyen says, it means that you will be in a state of peace and security, as the verse says, and there'll be such abundance that you'll be able to eat. The soivavu means mental fullness. You'll be able to eat in a pleasant and an enjoyable way, because Baruch Hashem, that this is not your last piece of bread. You don't have to worry about, okay, should I eat? Should I leave it? Like God forbid happened during times of famine, during the war, during Holocaust, whatever it might be. You could eat it in a way that you are totally filled mentally, so to speak, as he uses the word, the expression b'neimus ve'arevus, pleasantly, in a sort of sweet manner. That is what that's what the Rasak says. Well, the B'chor Shoir, another one of the known commentaries, actually he says it means physically, and he says that Hashem will bless us if you, again, will follow the Torah and follow my statutes. Hashem will bless us that you'll be so healthy that you'll be able to eat, more than the rest of us have to be careful, but at that point we will actually be healthier. I guess maybe even on a physical way, but when things are more secure and things are more safe and things like this, you're healthier, and therefore you could afford to eat more food. The Orach Chaim goes on to say, the Orach Chaim, many of you have heard of the Orach Chaim, of course, says that sometimes the Talmud says, Ravcha lebesima shachiach. He says, when you have something that really tastes good, you always find a little bit extra space in your system, in your stomach. Sometimes we eat at a restaurant, wherever it might be, we're full, but we still have room for some ice cream or some chocolate souffle or whatever is your favorite dessert. So that's all how some interpret this verse, that in addition to the abundance, but I want to share a story and an important message that relates to our discussion. This is a story. I read this story on Friday, and it's a pretty incredible story, and it relates to our discussion. And it's always good to share a Chassidic story, and the story goes as following. Some of you might have heard, L'chaim, by the way. Thank you for my cup provider. I don't know if I made a blessing here in the class, but I did make a blessing before I started to drink. So there is the story goes as follows. There was a great Torah scholar, a righteous individual, rabbi, leader of the community in Prague. We're going back probably about 300 years ago. His name was, he's known as the Noda B'Yehuda based on the Torah books that he wrote. His name was Rabbi Cheskel Landau. He was the chief rabbi in Prague during that period of time, where Prague was what we call in Hebrew, Ir ve'ein b'Yisrael, was a metropolitan for Jewish life. And he was the rabbi, Rabbi Cheskel Landau. And one day, into his office walks a Jew by the name of Label. Who was this Label? Label was one of the wealthiest members of the community, and he was an incredible Baal Tzedakah. He gave charity. He was generous. He was caring. He was there for people when they needed him. But to the rabbi's surprise, Rabbi Yecheskel Landau, the Noida Yehuda, to his surprise and to his somewhat astonishment or concern, this label appeared distraught, sort of shrunken, and the rabbi immediately asked, what's going on? So Label, embarrassingly but painfully, shared with Rabbi Yecheskel. He says, I was embarrassed to come talk about this, but in the last year my business turned south, very terribly so, and business I just kept on losing money. My mazel was not there, and I'm now at a point that I basically have lost all my money, everything. I don't even have enough to put bread on the table. I kept this hidden for a year. I even borrowed and did whatever I can to keep on supporting all the causes in the town that I was supporting, but I can't do it anymore, and I can't even support my own family. Rabbi Yecheskel compassionately looked at Label and said to him, no worries, I will take from the discretionary community funds, and I will make sure that you and your family are supported in an honorable way, and it's done with total discretion. Nobody has to know about it. And Labels responded to Rabbi Yecheskel Landau, and he said, no. He says, I cannot stay here in this town, knowing that the town over here is supporting my family. I'm just not comfortable. I refuse to do that. So Rabbi Yecheskel says to him, so what are you coming to me if you refuse for me to do this? So what do you expect? What do you want from me? Why are you here? So Label continued and told Rabbi Yecheskel, I'm going to leave town, and I'm going to become a beggar, like was what people did then when you had no money, and I'm going to go from town to town. The only thing I ask of you, Rabbi Yecheskel, since you are known all over by all the rabbis in all the towns in the greater area, cities and so on, all I want is a letter of sort of hamlatza, a letter of recommendation, a letter of approval and support from you, and I know that your letter will get me in once I bring it, come to these towns, and I have a letter of recommendation from you. It'll open doors for me. That's all I ask for. Rabbi Yecheskel said, sure, even though I don't usually do this, but for you, Label, I will do so. And he gives him Rabbi Label sits down, writes a letter of recommendation, of support, and our Label begins his journey. And sure enough, every city or town that he comes to, he first goes to the rabbi, leader of the community, and shows him the letter. And the rabbi, seeing the kind words and words of support that the famous, most respected scholar, Rabbi Yecheskel Landau, the Noida Yehuda, wrote about this individual, they immediately put him in touch with the people in their community that they knew could help and will help. And this allowed for our Reb Leib to earn a decent amount towards his plan to, number one, first he would send a significant amount home and only keep what he needed for himself to survive, and also with the hope that one day he'll be able to restart his business and hopefully his fortunes will return. And this went on. He went from town to town, city to city, and so on. One city, he ends up in a whatever given city, he goes over to the rabbi. The rabbi, of course, says, yes, I'll give you a letter of recommendation to so-and-so. He comes to one of the respected and kind members of the community. The fellow says, absolutely, you were recommended by my rabbi, and so on. If it's okay, you have here a nice room for you, but there's someone else that's here in town also. He was a magid. A magid was like a preacher. It was common then that one of the ways people would make a living is that they would come to a town. They were gifted speakers. They would come and talk to people, inspire them with words of inspiration, words of Torah, whatever it is, and people would give them a couple of kupkas for that. He says there's a darshan, a magid that's here in town. He is also sleeping in this room. You'll share rooms with him, and you guys will get to, I guess, know each other, schmooze, discuss, and so on. Fine, no problem. Gives him a comfortable bed, and Label starts on his daily routine for and he's doing well. He's doing well as he has the blessing and the support of Rabbi Cheskel Landau. Fine, gets to know the darshan, the magid a little bit. They schmooze, they this, they that, and so on. One day, as Label wakes up in the morning, and he checks his pockets and so on and so forth, and to his horror, the letter of recommendation from his beloved Rabbi Cheskel Landau is gone. It's gone. And then he gives a look and he sees that the bed of his roommate is also totally, all the belongings and everything is gone. And he immediately realizes what happened. This fellow, seeing that his business, so to speak, his livelihood was going much better, decided to steal the letter and disappeared. Label was devastated. What is he going to do? He doesn't have the letter. So what could he do? All he could do is now be a beggar without recommendation, which didn't get him much. And not to speak about, he had no funds to send back to his family. And this went on for a while. One day, he, as he's walking the streets, and typically you also go by the synagogues in town, which you could go in, maybe catch a nap on a bench or so on, and he hears a group of Chassidim who are joyous, and they're saying l'chaim, and somehow they invite him to come over and join. They see a beggar, but they were kind people. They say, come join us, have a little l'chaim. We're doing a farbrengen, we're doing a little, some happy words of sharing with each other and so on. So come, join us. And he joins them, and they give him a l'chaim, and as they give him another l'chaim, and he warms up, and he loosens up, and so on. And finally, they sort of ask him what's his story, and he pours out his whole heart. He tells them the entire story, from beginning to the end. And so they say to him, look, we are disciples of the holy Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Chassidic movement. This was in the early years of the Chassidic movement. There were many who were still not open, or were maybe even suspect to the Chassidic movement, and did not consider themselves part of, or were maybe even in opposition to the Chassidic movement. Our Label was not a Chassid. He was not part of the Chassidic movement. However, they said, we are disciples of the Baal Shem Tov. We are traveling to the Baal Shem Tov. We will mention you to the Baal Shem Tov for blessing. Baal Shem Tov is a tremendous holy Jew, known for many miraculous stories and so on. We will mention the Baal Shem Tov. Don't leave town. Wait a couple of days till we come back, and we'll tell you what the result of our mentioning you to the Baal Shem Tov is. Fine. Even though, again, as I mentioned, he was not a chassid of the Baal Shem Tov, but he said, okay, what has he got to lose? And he saw that these people were pious and sincere and caring, so he's going to go along with the plan. Sure enough, a couple of days later, they come back, and the Baal Shem Tov said, and they tell him, Baal Shem Tov said that you should return to your town immediately. Return to my town? I have nothing to return with. I'm so embarrassed. What am I going to go back to my town? But Baal Shem Tov said so clearly, so he decided to follow, to listen. He goes back to his town, and as was again typical those days, it was very common. You come to town, you go straight to the synagogue. He comes to the synagogue, and nobody recognizes him, but he hears talk. What is the talk that he hears? That's where the news, all the news was shared in shul, before davening, after davening, whatever it is. That's where the news was shared. And he finds out that his wife there's a simcha, a town. I guess it was a simcha in town or a city, Prague. But there's a simcha. What's a simcha? That his own wife is getting remarried. My wife is getting remarried? What does that mean? So he gets to the bottom of it, and he finds out that the Bezdin, the local Bezdin, ruled that she could get remarried because her husband is deceased. Well, how did they determine that her husband is deceased? He says, well, some poor beggar or Magid, some poor Magid came to town. And not Magid, actually. At that point, I forgot to mention, he had now a letter from Rabbi Cheskel Landau. So this thief that stole the letter abandoned his Magid job and became a collector, but he did very well. And some fellow testified that he came across this beggar in a different town. The beggar didn't come to town, but he came across this beggar in a different town and a letter in his pocket. And in his pocket, there was a letter from Rabbi Cheskel Landau that said, his letter of support. So based on the letter that this fellow was testifying that the beggar had in his pocket, the Bezdin ruled that her husband is deceased. She doesn't have to remain single for the rest of her life, and she could get remarried. So he runs immediately to Rabbi Cheskel Landau. He comes into Rabbi Cheskel, and he says to Rabbi Cheskel, do you remember me? Do you know who I am? And after looking a little closer, because he was unrecognizable because of his both physical state and his dress, Rabbi Cheskel says to him, Label? He says, yeah, Label, but you're dead. The whole town spoke about your passing. We were sad. He says, Rebbe, I'm right here. I'm not dead. And he goes on to tell him the entire story about his letter, about it being stolen. And here both Rabbi Cheskel and Label realized the greatness and vision, holy vision of the Baal Shem Tov. And of course, the marriage was canceled, and Label was able to come back in town, and the money that they used, that he sent to his family, was able to be to sort of reinstate himself or reestablish himself, and Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. So this is a story I happened to read on Friday, and I was thinking about this in relationship to our discussion. There's many lessons you could learn from this story. My own personal sort of analyzation. But one of the lessons you could learn over here, another deeper insight, and also relating to our discussion. You'll eat your bread in a way that you will be satiated. What does this mean? What does this mean? So on a deeper level, this means exactly this discussion that we started with. When you eat bread in a way that you're satiated, when it was earned in an honest way, when you follow the proper moral, ethical directions of Torah of how you distribute charity based on the wealth that you have, and also vice versa, when you're not looking for and you're not jealous of someone else's money and funds, because that's not eating in a way that you're satiated. Eating in a way that you are satiated, the blessing on a deeper level that the Torah is telling you is, not only will you be blessed, and hopefully God blesses you with plenty, but no matter, most of the time, the joy and the contentment that a person has, to the extent that what they have is plenty, is when they truly appreciate and value what they have. To use the Mishnah's expression that we've shared so many times, Ezeu Ashir, who is truly wealthy, Hasamech Bechelko, one who is content with what they have. So Vachaltem Lachmechem Lasoiv on a deeper level means in both directions. Look at the story we just shared. Here the fellow had a letter of Rabbi Cheskel Landau. For him it was a letter of blessing. For him it brought him the help that he needed. When someone else took it from him and stole it from him, which seemingly was, the gold card for wealth on his level, it became a poison. He ended up passing away. And the deeper insight over here is he passed away also spiritually. He lost his neshama, he lost his soul. Once he stole a letter from someone else, perceiving that will give him more wealth, because why does he deserve it? I deserve it, and so on, and he has too much, and I should get more, and so on. At that point, he turned up being deceased. It doesn't only mean, even though the story is that he physically passed away, but also spiritually. Once you do that, you've lost your neshama, you've lost your soul. You lost who you are. So on a deeper level, the Torah is telling us, V'chaltem lachmechem l'sova. The blessing that the Torah is telling us is not only abundance. You can have abundance, and this is where the attention of this politician has some positivity, meaning you have to ask yourself, am I earning the money in a kosher way, in a proper way? Am I also using that blessing to help others? When you do so, is V'chaltem lachmechem l'sova. And again, as underscored in both directions, there's no problem and there's no reason that one should be jealous or try to take away from someone else that has money that we perceive as too much. None of my business. On the other hand, what we do have and what we have, be content, be happy. Know that is a chaltem lachem l'soiva. Eat your bread. And notice, the Torah doesn't say v'chaltem lechem l'soiva. You will eat bread. Your bread. That which is coming your way, you will be able to eat l'soiva. You'll be able to eat with full content, with full satisfaction, with full pleasantness, with full joy, with full appreciation, with full inner peace. That's the way you have to look at what you have. What David has given you. There's an old saying, Guck nicht in jenem's teller. Don't look at someone else's plate. Both ways. So this is the story over here. Chassidic story I saw. Beautiful message. Of course, it also tells us the power of tzaddikim, of righteous men, their vision, their care, the merit of faith in following what our holy teachers tell us. All those are beautiful messages. But here, in this case, we see this person had a certain journey he had to take. He had to, for whatever reason, lose his money beyond perhaps our understanding. He had to leave town. He had to go through a certain period of time. There was a period of time that, for whatever reason, that letter had to be taken away. As a result of that, that caused him that he would return home, because the time came for him to return home and continue his journey in that way. All these are wonderful, beautiful messages. We don't know what our journey is. We don't know exactly what the future holds. But that's why it says in the Torah, Tomim tiyem Hashem lekecha, be wholesome, be trusting with God, your God. When we do that, then we're content with what we have. We make the most of what we have. We share and are kind in the best way that we can. And in that way, there will be, as the Torah says, V'yishaftem aret levetach, you'll rest securely in your land. When every individual, insecurity and strife happens when people start having these kind of attitudes. What we call in this country class warfare, etc., etc. And that extends itself into extreme ways. But when you're satisfied with what you have, then you're at peace. The people around you are at peace. You know it's all in Hashem's hands. You live life in peace in your own. This is the way you treat your family, you train your family, your community, and so on. And that brings that you rest and live securely in your land. So this is my thoughts for today. Thank you for allowing me to share. Everybody have a fantastic and wonderful and simchadik week. Please share these words of Torah.